as a Foreign Service officer, we see a lot of news, we see things that are happening in the world. Who are the people really behind it, and how are they making a difference? So those are Foreign Service officers, and today I'd like to tell you about the work that we do, as well as fellowship pathways to the Foreign Service. I do want to do a disclaimer that fellowships aren't the only way to join the Foreign Service. There's other pathways as well. But for those of you that are not members of MAPS or not familiar with our nonprofit organization, the purpose of this organization is to build and formalize a community. We promote institutional representation across the public service field, and we help facilitate professional development for American Muslim public servants and those interested in our career paths. We have a star-studded panelist today from different fellowship backgrounds: Pickering, Rangel, Foreign Affairs and IT, USAID, Payne, and there's a couple others that we'll mention today that we hope that you will check out on the website. All right, so let's get started. As I mentioned, today we will be talking about the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship, which is a graduate fellowship, meaning you have to have graduated from college. Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Graduate Fellowship Program, same as Thomas Pickering Fellowship for those who have a college degree. Foreign Affairs Information Technology Fellowship, again, you need a college degree. William D. Clark Senior Diplomatic Security Fellowship, and the Donald M. Payne International Development Graduate Fellowship Program. All of these programs are targeted for those who already have a bachelor's and would like to get a 2 years master's degree. So with these fellowship programs, the government will pay for you to go back to graduate school and then come on as into the Foreign Service, whether it's with the State Department or USAID. But before we get into those fellowship programs, let's talk a little bit about what exactly is the Foreign Service. It has the word foreign in it, and it has the word service in it. So the Foreign Service is the U.S. diplomatic corps that's working around the world at 270 posts and in U.S. locations. So we have some locations here in the United States, such as in New York, where we have the United Nations, such as a couple posts out west and throughout the country. But most of our work is in foreign countries. It's abroad at other places, at embassies and consulates. As Foreign Service officers and as diplomats working for different agencies, but primarily State Department and USAID, we promote peace, security, prosperity, freedom, respect for human dignity. We help Americans overseas in time of a crisis. Perhaps you've traveled abroad and lost a passport. You probably came in touch with a Foreign Service officer, a consular officer that helped you renew your passport. We promote human rights and we combat trafficking in persons. We also coordinate on security and conflict resolution, especially after war, or our goal is to prevent war so that we don't have to do conflict rehabilitation. We manage large embassy communities. We promote dialogue, exchanges, and understanding. So perhaps you've come across Fulbright Fellows, or maybe you went to school with international students. Perhaps they were here on an international exchange program funded through the State Department.
Sorry, Mariya, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think there's comments in the chat saying if you can present it, and we're like stuck on the presentation.
Is it still on the first, or is it on the?
It just started moving, but I think like it's very tiny for people to see.
Okay, let me see what I can do. Thank you for the heads up on that.
And Mariya, just a question: are you going to share the slides after the meeting?
Yes, our hope is to do that. We are hoping to definitely share the recording, but let me figure out how to. Okay, let me dismiss. Stop presenting. Okay, let me present again, and let's see if I can click on the correct button. So instead of the window, I should share the entire screen. Okay, let me know if you can see it now. Do you guys see it big and large now?
Yep.
Is it better?
Yep.
Okay, and when I click through the slides, does it move? Is it moving through the slides?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
excellent. Okay, so really quickly back on this. So with the different things that we do. We also facilitate international trade and cooperation and environmental issues. So, being at the forefront of our economic prowess, we work with a lot of agencies across the United States government to help promote U.S. trade in U.S. markets. We help with international development and humanitarian efforts. We have a Payne Fellow that will talk about that. And of course, we promote U.S. exports of cultural art. So everything that allows the United States to maintain our military and economic prowess, Foreign Service officers and other agencies are behind the scenes helping that happen. So the biggest thing to know about Foreign Service officers is this delineation between a generalist and a specialist. Generalist Foreign Service officers are typically divided into 5 cones, we call them, or they're specialized areas. These are specialized areas you must select when you're applying to be in the Foreign Service. Those cones are political, economic, public diplomacy, management, and consular. I won't go over each of them in great detail because you can find that information online, but just remember that when we speak about just FSOs in general format, we're talking about generalist Foreign Service officers. So, for example, I am a political coned officer, but everyone who joins the generalist Foreign Service must do a consular tour. So you can't get around the visa work. That's required for you to get tenured. But maybe you gravitate towards working on economic policy because you have a background in that. Maybe you gravitate towards, public messaging or social media or exchanges or managing large budgets. Management cones are the people that make the embassies run around 24/7. They negotiate with host governments for land, for our buildings. They make sure that we have everything we need to do diplomacy, from everything from computers to diplomatic mail to cars to our houses, all of that. The other special foreign service officers are foreign service specialists. These are very broad categories. Again, you can find them online. You can be a foreign service specialist in administration. So if you have background in doing scheduling, in maintaining work, so there's jobs for those that have specialized fields in that. If you're an engineer, you have construction background, you have operations background, you have maintenance background, you can join diplomatic security in this realm, in the building, construction, operations, and maintenance as a foreign service specialist. IT is a growing field, as you know, with cyberspace and cyber security in the world that we live in today, AI, cyber crimes. Information technology is growing, and in fact, we have a whole fellowship dedicated to that we'll dive into very soon. We also have foreign service specialists that are dedicated to education and cultural affairs. Maybe you want to switch a career from an educational background, or you love facilitating cultural affairs, you love languages, you love people-to-people diplomacy. We have people that specialize just in that. Doesn't mean you can't do this work in the generalist foreign service. Think of the generalists as jack of all trades. They move around from one place to another. You could do a political tour, you could do an economic tour, maybe you want to diversify and go do a concert tour. You keep hopping around, or you can just specialize in one. But think of these as people that are very much specialized. Once you're in this field, you're in this field and you're supporting the embassy and foreign service in this capacity. We also have law enforcement and security. So if you have a background in law enforcement, or if you want to break into law enforcement and security, this is a really great way. The William Clark Fellowship we talked about, that falls into here, the diplomatic security. We have special federal agents dedicated to the State Department, protection of State Department buildings, personnel, as well as property. They're called diplomatic security, and they're just like FBI agents, but specialized for State Department. And then medical and health. So if you have spouses, or if you yourself have a medical background and you're like, you know what, I don't want to be a nurse anymore. I don't want to be a medical doctor anymore, but I want to do it. I want to do all that, medical doctor and be a nurse for families abroad. Maybe you want to work at diplomatic missions abroad. You can do that. I will say that, please consider the pay cuts in these fields. And we'll talk about pay scale in a little bit. But all of this is public service. And so you're not making the Wall Street salaries if that is something that is of importance to you. But we will talk about finances in a bit. So generalists and specialists, that's the main one. But the important thing, the key takeaway is that everyone is a diplomat. We don't differentiate that one person is a specialist and is the other. When you work at an overseas embassy, everybody gets a diplomatic passport. Everyone has access to networking. Everyone is representing the United States abroad. Everyone gets free housing overseas. Everyone gets extensive travel opportunities. And of course, as a diplomat, with the Geneva Conventions, we have certain immunities and privileges that we enjoy. That's a photo of me, and I'm showing all 3 of my passports because I am a Pakistani immigrant. Then I naturalized as a US citizen and got my blue passport, and then I got my black passport. So it was a really proud moment for me. So if you're worried, that's another thing I want to highlight is that you're a citizen, you can apply, citizenship is required. You cannot apply as a green card holder. But once you are a citizen and you are joining the foreign service, you will get a diplomatic black passport. So there's a lot of training opportunities as a diplomat. My colleagues will tell you during the Q&A in a little bit about the different ways in which the Foreign Service dedicates itself to our development. We have a whole institute dedicated to our development. It's called the Foreign Service Institute. Think of this as the academy just for diplomats. For example, when I went out to go serve in Amman, Jordan, the Foreign Service paid for me to be an 8-month-long Arabic language training. I got paid to show up to class to learn Arabic, like a dream come true, right? So, and then in addition to that, they taught me the skills that I needed to go be a consular officer, how to adjudicate a visa, how to adjudicate a passport. So, anytime you're assigned to an assignment or a diplomatic post, wherever that may be, overseas or domestically, the Foreign Service Institute will give you the soft and the hard skills you need to do your job. This can range from leadership courses to how to do Excel to regional studies, to basically think of it as a mini graduate school, but you keep going back and forth and learning and in and out. And that's a really great tool and a resource that a lot of other foreign services from other countries do not have. We also have a lot of career planning and training resources. And then those that are in the civil service also have opportunities for transition programs both in and out of the foreign service. So you can be a civil servant and serve overseas as well. And you can be a civil servant and take advantage of opportunities at the Foreign Service Institute and the career planning. So one thing that I didn't mention at the beginning is the difference between a civil and foreign service. Foreign service officers are commissioned officers. We have a commission we're Senate confirmed. We have a big certificate hanging on our walls. We're commissioned. And so we represent the United States officially abroad, but so do for civil servants. Civil servants are primarily based here in the United States. They work at Maine State, but they're not traveling as often. They haven't chosen foreign service as a lifestyle, but they are diplomats in their right, and they also have Black passports for travel, and they work in diplomacy, they work in foreign affairs. They just don't live overseas to execute. They have chosen to live here. Benefits and pay scales. So all the great benefits that every federal job can offer. We get life insurance, health benefits, a really great thrift savings plan, long-term health care, paid parental leave, paid medical leave, family health leave, holidays, and then the pay scales. So this is information that you can find online. The Foreign Service pay scale and the General Service, which is for civil service, can be found online. When you come in as a Foreign Service officer, you start at pay grades 6, 5, or 4. And then you can, depending on if you already have the level of education and the level of experience you have, you can be on grades scales 1 through 14. So the maximum you can come in at is grade 4, step 14, and that's a little over $100,000. So the big question is, how do you apply? How do you apply to become a Foreign Service officer? So this is one of the few jobs in the world where you don't apply through usajobs.gov. You don't send your resume to a friend and they forward it for you. This is not something that's based off of connections. This is completely based on your ability to go through a meritorious process, the examinations process. So what is that examination and selection process? So I'm going to click on this link and that will be shared with you abroad. Let me know if you can see my screen still. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So these are the 5 steps of becoming a Foreign Service officer. I'm going to paste that in our Google link right now so that I chat. So everyone, the first step to becoming a Foreign Service officer is something that's called the Foreign Service Officer Test, FSOT. It's 3 hours on a Saturday, a hodgepodge of cultural, historical, foreign policy questions, how to fix a sentence, English questions, how to write an essay, IT information security questions. Think of it as an SAT purely for Foreign Service officers. Everyone must take that. Step 2 is the Foreign Service Officer Assessment. So this is a full day of interview where you do a case management exercise, a group exercise, and a structured interview. And then step 3 is if you are able to meet the minimum medical requirements, top secret security requirements, and an evaluation by a suitability board. Step 4 is you wait on the register. So the register is a dynamic list of people that are constantly changing. So if you scored higher, then your name goes higher. If you scored lower, then your score goes lower. If there's more people taking the test, their name goes at the top. So we call it the register. But as I'll talk about later in the foreign fellowships, fellowships, if you go through the fellowship route, you don't have to wait on the register because you're already guaranteed a spot in the Foreign Service. And step 5 is the offer. So once you're selected and you pass through steps 1 through 4, you are given a final offer. I always encourage people to negotiate their salary. So if you're offered a certain grade level in a step, push back, advocate for more, be your own advocate. So all of this information is public. You can find it online. Register. This is the typical path to becoming a Foreign Service generalist officer. Please be sure to check how to become a specialist officer. There's some requirements are a little bit different. Okay, now let's talk right into our fellowships. So I will pass it over to our first panelist to just introduce themselves, tell us their name, where they've served, and how they learned about the Pickering Fellowship. And then we'll pass it over to the Rangel Fellow, and then the FAIT Fellow and Clark Fellow. You're welcome to turn. I will stop sharing my screen if you'd like to turn on your video too.
Okay, thanks, Mariya. So I should go ahead and get started?
Yes, please do. So
Okay.
tell us about your name, where you've served, how you learned about the fellowship program.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ramata Sow. I am from Silver Spring, Maryland. I am of half Mauritanian descent. I went to Northwestern University for undergrad, and then I went to Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, SAIS, for my master's. So I heard about the Pickering Fellowship first through, I did a summer program before my senior year of college. It was called the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program. And so this program was basically an opportunity to network and meet people that worked in international relations in DC. I learned about both the Rangel and the Pickering Fellowships for the Foreign Service. But I think I realized in the moment that I wanted to work a little bit before committing to, to applying to the fellowship, because I knew it was going to be at least like a 5-year commitment. And so I wanted to work first. And so basically, after I graduated from Northwestern, I worked for 5 years in, international relations field. I worked for an USAID contractor. I worked in IT a little bit. And then I realized, okay, like now I want to go ahead and pursue the Foreign Service path. But I knew that I wanted to apply to either Rangel or Pickering. So I actually applied to both. And the reason why I wanted to apply to either of the fellowships was because I knew that it would be a nice pathway into the Foreign Service, including mentorship, including some kind of subsidization of the tuition for grad school. And also, as Mariya mentioned, when you join either fellowship, you don't have to wait on the register. So essentially, you're fast-tracked into joining the Foreign Service. And so I knew that I wanted to join the Foreign Service because I wanted to engage in public service and combine it with my other interests in international affairs, in travel, living in other countries, learning about other cultures and other languages, etc. And so I am a public diplomacy coned officer. And so basically what that means is that I promote U.S. interests abroad, and I explain to foreign audiences how American history, values, and traditions shape foreign policy. I'm also shaping and conveying our foreign policy to press and foreign audiences. So my first tour was in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I was at the consulate there as the press attaché. And so in that role, I facilitated local media coverage for the consul general and for visiting U.S. government officials to promote better understanding of the U.S. As Mariya mentioned, there's training that was involved before I went. I did 8 months of Arabic. I also did 4 weeks of public diplomacy tradecraft. I had an amazing opportunity to engage with a wide range of people in Saudi Arabia, including opinion leaders, journalists, civil society members, and many more, to shape our public messages and perceptions of the US and our American foreign policy. Um, I also leveraged relationships that I had made in country that I had cultivated with Saudi journalists, social media influencers to host and moderate a large range of insightful panel discussions. So a lot of people to people engagement. So my next tour after that was I was a consular officer in Johannesburg. So as Mariya mentioned, consular is even if it's not your main track, it's something that everyone has to do, and it's usually in your first or your second tour. So for me, it was my second tour. I was mainly focused on immigrant visas, adjudicating immigrant visas, and then of course, everyone has to do the non-immigrant visas and American citizen services. So helping Americans overseas that are, distressed, have you need a passport renewal. Tell me if I'm going on too long, but I also, given that I'm public diplomacy coned, I wanted to make sure that I still focused on outreach, even though I was doing my consular tour. And so I worked with the public affairs team in Mission South Africa to come up with some public outreach strategies to, we had a whole campaign of, how do you apply for a visa? How do you become better prepared for your visa application? That sort of thing. And it was a unique time to be in Johannesburg because it was COVID. And so we had to come up with some creative measures to do outreach. And so currently I'm in my third tour. I am back in DC. A lot of Foreign Service officers come back to DC for their third tour. It's like coming back to the mothership. It's good for networking. It's good to just kind of reunite with your colleagues in DC. So I'm currently working as a press and communications advisor in the Bureau for Near Eastern Affairs. So I was covering the Arabian Peninsula for the first year of my tour here, and now I'm covering Israeli-Palestinian affairs. I think I'll leave it at that. I've spoken a lot, and I'm happy to take your questions about the Pickering Fellowship or my work specifically in the Foreign Service. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ramata. That was an excellent overview. Something that you shared is that your background before coming into the Foreign Service. So I'd like to emphasize that for a lot of people, Foreign Service is a career switch. So people come in with having already careers, maybe other jobs. You don't have to be fresh out of college. You don't have to be fresh out of graduate school. This is a career for everyone. The age limit is 54. So if you are in your mid 40s, or if you are late in your 30s, or if you are 51 and you want to join the Foreign Service, you can. The age cutoff is 54. And someone asked about, if you can take this, join the Foreign Service without the test. Unfortunately, the Foreign Service is through the testing process, even through the fellowships, which we'll talk about. So I'll pass it on to Sulaiman next, Toghral, to talk a little bit about the Rangel Fellowship, how he learned about that, his path before that, assignments where he has served. And once we go through all the panelists, we'll dive into what these fellowships actually entail and how you can apply. Over to you, Sulaiman. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your assignments.
Oh, thank you, Mariya and Ramata. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I joined the Foreign Service through the Rangel program, and similar to Ramata and Mariya, I'm originally from Afghanistan. I was not aware of these programs until I met people similar to some of you guys. Are probably this is the first time, so I'm glad to participate in this event. But my first assignment, I went to Jakarta, Indonesia, to represent the U.S. government as a consular officer. That was exciting for me because I love traveling, and especially mostly I love living overseas. That's just something I enjoyed prior to the Foreign Service. And then for my second assignment, I went to Islamabad, Pakistan, to help with visas. Specifically, I was tasked to help our Afghan allies who had supported the U.S. government. So again, that was a unique experience for me because as a former Afghan refugee, now I was on the other side helping those who have helped the U.S. government. And currently, I'm at the Foreign Service Institute. This is where Mariya mentioned it's an academy where diplomats get their training before they're asked to go serve abroad. And I'm currently learning French as I prepare for my third assignment, where I'm going to be the consular chief in Nouakchott, Mauritania. Um, I'm super excited, and it's been a unique experience for me as a U.S. government official or a U.S. diplomat living and working in Muslim countries. That's something I enjoy a lot. What else? Prior to the Foreign Service, similar to Ramata, I was not. Um, I was a civil servant actually for the Bureau of Middle East and North Africa, and I enjoyed that job a lot. Again, I was in a unique position to serve uh, the U.S. government, but and also I was around my family, so it kind of gave me some time to get some experience under my belt, and then make that big decision to go live overseas. As far as my job, Ramata is a PD, a public diplomacy officer. I am consular cone. What that means is I specialize in consular services, but as generalists, we have the opportunity to work in other four other cones as well. So I've had the opportunity to help my colleagues in different sections as well, which I'm happy to talk about later. And for me, the why, I think it's important that we participate and serve. We all have our unique stories, and so for me, just the opportunity to give back. That's been like and I'm still figuring that out. So every assignment, every foreign policy change, you have time to reflect on it. But for me, I think just giving back is what drives me day to day, and I look forward to doing that in Mauritania. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your background. So we have a public diplomacy coned officer. We have a consular coned officer. I mentioned I'm a political coned officer. I didn't mention my assignment, so I'll go ahead and do that ASAP. I've served in Amman, Jordan as a consular officer. I've served in Doha, Qatar as a consular officer as well. I was the non-immigrant visa chief there. I just wrapped up my assignment as a political military officer in the Bureau of Political Military Affairs here in Washington. So there are opportunities for foreign service officers to come back to Washington and serve here in the various different bureaus and offices we have, and also do detailee assignments. We have people that go over to the NSC, to other agencies and departments. And I'm moving this summer to New York to work at the United Nations, our U.S. mission to the UN. So I'm super excited about that. So again, this is a life of boxes. This is a life of constant moving. This is a lifestyle that you and your families have to want. This is not a 9 to 5, go to work, come back home. This is a around the clock, you're a full-time diplomat at all hours of the day type of job. But it's humbling, as my colleagues have already mentioned. It's a fulfilling work, it's rewarding work. Never will you be able to say that, yes, I was at the forefront of the World Cup, or I made that happen. I was there when this evacuation happened. I helped Americans repatriate during COVID. I helped, with the messaging of in treaty negotiation. I was there when war between Israel and Hamas broke out. Like as world events are happening, you're at the forefront of making history. And that's something that's really unique and drives me to give back to my country, even though you put yourself in situations that have risk and you're serving sometimes in really dangerous and dangerous zones, conflict zones, and also countries where your standard of living is not as the one you're used to in the United States. But you get that exposure to a different culture. You get that exposure to learn another language, and you connect on a human level. So you get to share your part of America with others. All right, so let me pass it over to Jeremiah at this time. Jeremiah is also a Foreign Service Officer, but he's a specialist, and he came in through the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. So, Jeremiah, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're currently serving. Also, kudos to him. He is currently in Mumbai, and it is 3 a.m. over there. So, look at how dedicated he is to this panel and wanting to share his knowledge with us. So, please give him a kudos as he comes online. Jeremiah, over to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Jeremiah. I'm originally from the DMV area. I was born in Virginia, raised in Maryland, but I went to schools in Virginia. I was commuted among that Beltway, that Beltway commute, that dreaded Beltway commute everyone experiences one time or another in this career. And now I just generally work in the DC area, but as Mariya mentioned, I'm in Mumbai, India. So I just say the DC area. I also only have a bachelor's degree. I think it's important to note that the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship might be the only one that offers funding to both undergrads and graduates. I did my undergrad at Harvard. I graduated in 2020. I studied art, psychology, and computer science. As a Foreign Affairs IT fellow um, and as a specialist, this means that we're only staying in the IT lane. We're only focusing on tech. And so that means I, along with the other specialists, that slide that Mariya mentioned earlier, we do not do consular tours. We focus exclusively on our specialty and we stay in our lane. And so medical folks will start day one doing the medical work. IT folks will start day one doing IT work. Engineers and architects doing facility stuff start day one doing their. And so this is that requirement as a consular officer to do a consular, or a requirement to do a consular tour is exclusive to the generalists. Just keep that in mind. If you're interested in all these fellowships, the specialist ones will only do the work in their specialty. I let's see. I applied because I knew that I wanted to get into the foreign service. One, in fact, Sulaiman and I were interns back in 2011, way before we came onto the fellowship scene. So it's been over 10 years, and so I back then I was not a tech student, but I drank the Kool-Aid. I switched over to STEM, and I switched from econ to computer science, and that around that time I had also like dropped out of college for a little bit just so I could like take a break. But around that time when I came back, my fellowship was created, and so I it was just a mix of like time and luck. And so I switched over to STEM, applied to this tech-oriented fellowship within the Foreign Service, um, and I knew that I wanted to join, and the way that I could help was through the tech side. Um, I'm happy to talk more about what my fellowship does. It's a little bit different, but same requirements and same benefits in terms of funding for grad school and all that as the other fellowships. But I'm coming in through what's called the specialist, foreign service specialist side, which again does fund both undergraduates and graduates. So if that's something that that's where you are in your academic career, feel free to find me.
Okay, amazing. So those were all the three State Department fellowships. So we've kind of talked about generalists, we've talked about specialists, and we also have online here Afshah, who is our USAID fellow. So within the U.S. Agency for International Aid and Development, there's also a fellowship, and there's also foreign service officers. So again, I'll flip over to the PowerPoint in a second, and we'll go into the details of these different fellowships, what they entail, the requirements for them. But I do want to take a moment to give a few minutes to Afshah to introduce herself and what she does as a Foreign Service Officer, as a Payne Fellow. She came in through the Payne Fellowship, Donald Payne Fellowship, but in the development world. So if you have background, or if you're interested in aid and development and monitoring and evaluation and US dollars going to go do goodwill stuff, you want maybe the USAID Fellowship or USAID Foreign Service is a better fit for you. Afshah, where are you?
Hi guys, my name is Afshah Kharal. Assalamu alaikum. So yeah, I work for the U.S. Agency for International Development. I joined last year, so I'm a very new Foreign Service officer. And similar to the State Department, we have technical specialties. So instead of cones, we have like specialties such as like health, education, economic growth. The legal office is also one. And then you could also be a generalist. So I came in as an education foreign service officer. So what I will mainly be doing is going abroad, going to like certain embassies, and like working with the local governments there and NGOs and stuff, and providing U.S. Government taxpayer money to support education systems in the local country. So I guess like the difference between USAID and FSOs are like we're more involved in managing and like implementing development projects, humanitarian assistance, and lots of contracts and working with the local team in the country. And then what else? Yeah, so I graduated. I'm originally from Pakistan. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I graduated from Hunter CUNY, and then I went on for my master's in economic and political development at Columbia School of International and Political Affairs. And I graduated grad school last year, so I moved to the DMV area now. So I think one of the big differences between USAID and state FSOs is that we are mandated a graduate degree, so we need one to become a specialist here. And also we have a longer time in DC because they train us for like a year and a half before we go out. And I will be going out to Amman, Jordan as my first post next year. So I think, yeah, I didn't know, Mariya, that you didn't as your first post.
I served
Wow.
there, and also Ramata is going there soon.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so maybe we'll cross paths. Yeah, so I will be going there in next year, and then I will be doing FSI for language coming up in September. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Thank you all so much for your overview. Don't worry, everyone on the line, you do not have to memorize all of that information and background. I'm going to switch over to our PowerPoint so we can get more details on exactly the fellowships that they talked about. If someone can please let me know you can see my screen. Yes?
Yeah.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Okay, and it's full screen, right? Okay, excellent. So let me make sure that I can do that. Okay, so we talked about the Pickering, Rangel, FAIT, and Clark fellowships. So all of these fellowships were established to promote excellence and diversity in the Foreign Service and prepare individuals for careers in the Foreign Service. They were established because the State Department is historically known as male, pale, and Yale. That means there's not a lot of people like you and me in the Foreign Service. We need you guys to join the Foreign Service so we can bring our rich perspectives and experiences to the foreign policy making process. The fellowship is not just limited in diversity to religious background or ethnic background or immigrant background. It's diversity in all senses. So, for example, if you went to a small college, geographical diversity, because historically the Foreign Service has been comprised of people living in the East Coast, diversity in sexuality, diversity in train of thought and political thought, whatever diversity that you bring to the table is what will help you qualify and make a strong candidate for the Pickering, Rangel, FAIT, and Clark fellowships. So what do these fellowships promise? First of all, they pay for you to go to grad school. So you must get into a 2 years master's degree program on your own. You apply to whatever school you want as long as it's in the realm of world affairs, international affairs. You get into that on your own. And then once you get into that, if you're also selected as one of these fellows, the Congress will pay for you up to $106,000 over the span of 2 years for your tuition, stipends, housing, and travel. It also comes with 10-week internships at the State Department in Washington, D.C., as well as a 10-week internship at an overseas U.S. embassy or consulate. If you're a FAIT fellow or a Clark fellow, of course, you'll do these internships in your field of area. If you're a Pickering fellow, your domestic internship is at the main state building at the State Department, and your overseas is at an overseas embassy. If you're a Rangel fellow, because it's named after Charles B. Rangel, who was a congressperson, you'll do your first domestic English internship on the Hill and your second one overseas. But again, everyone's a foreign service officer, everyone is a diplomat. You're just coming through different pathways, a specialist or generalist, and you're coming through different specialty areas. Coming through these programs also gives you access to mentoring, professional development, and a support network, and it helps you prepare for those tests. Now, I want to be very clear. You still have to take the FSOT and you still have to take the FSOA that I mentioned earlier. If you're coming through the regular path, i.e., you don't want to go to grad school, you don't want to apply to these fellowships, and you don't want to have a guaranteed spot in the Foreign Service, you just want to do it on your own, you want to switch a career, that's fine. But you'll have to follow those steps that I showed earlier at the website that's linked in our chat box. These prestigious fellowships allow you to bypass only one thing, and that is the register. The register is basically a list of all the individuals who have taken the exam at any given moment who are competing for a slot. And 4 times a year, the top 100 or so people get called in, or depending on how many ever slots there are, to come and join orientation. So it's not like, you joined today and I joined tomorrow. No, people come in cohorts. So people will remember those cohorts. Like I came in the September 2018 cohort of 70 people. I remember all those people because we shared a communal orientation together. Everyone has a cohort that they share. But each year, there's about 4 or so cohorts that the State Department can accommodate. So if you think about it, January, they let in 100 people. April, they let in 100 people. July, they let in 100 people. September. So that's about 400 people off the register that come off every year. But that also means there's hundreds of people applying, and the register is dynamic. So again, these fellowships will allow you to bypass the register because you're already guaranteed a spot in the Foreign Service if you maintain a 3.2 GPA in your graduate school program. Of course, I already talked about citizenship. You need that to be a federal employee, and you complete your graduate program. So as soon as you complete that, you have a job waiting for you. Of course, you still have to pass the medical clearance, the top security clearance. None of those are made easier, or you get to bypass them. The only thing you bypass is the register. So let's compare and contrast some of these fellowships. So the Pickering Fellowship is named after a a diplomat. He's a giant in the State Department, 40 years of service. He's a 7-time diplomat. The Rangel Fellowship is named after Charles B. Rangel. He was a congressman. The Foreign Affairs in IT doesn't have a name associated with it. And the Clark Fellowship is named after William D. Clark Sr. For diplomatic security. All of them require citizenship. Please pay attention to these age limits, as I have mentioned. The FAIT does have an age limit between 21 to 60. And because you have to maintain a physical readiness for the Clark Fellowship, there is an age cutoff apparently at 19 to 32. All of these require a 2 years master's in world affairs. Again, you choose the program you want to go to. You have to get into the graduate school at your own, but you must maintain a 3.2 when you graduate from this program. The tuition, as I mentioned earlier, is $42,000 per year. So when you add all of that up, plus you get paid during the internships, you make $10,000 per internship, and your flights paid for, your visas are paid for, your inoculations are paid for, everything is covered. But because while you're in graduate school, you will have 2 internships lined up, but you will be selected into them, and there's a small application process for where you want to go. So again, you must do a domestic internship and one overseas, and that's across the board. The only difference is that Rangel Fellows do one on the Hill, and the Clark and FAIT Fellows must do their overseas ones in their respective specialty areas, IT or Regional Security Office. Everyone gets development and mentoring and guidance for examinations over the course of the application process, as well as after you've entered. In fact, we have an organization affinity group within the State Department called the Pickering Rangel Affairs Association, and I believe the FAIT and Clark Fellows are also members of that. Testing, like I mentioned, you still have to take the FSOT and pass it. You still have to take the FSOA and pass it. This is not a bypassing of that. Everyone who comes through these prestigious fellowship programs are qualified. You're coming in with masters, and you still have to take the examinations just like everyone else. But the difference again is when you graduate or when you come in, the Pickering and Rangels are generalists, and FAIT Clark Fellows are specialists. So the FAIT come in as diplomatic technology officers, and Clark Fellowships come in as diplomatic security agents. They're federal agents. They also have a readiness test that they have to take and a specialist test that they have to take. So FAIT does not take the FSOT, they take the FSSA, which is the Foreign Service Specialist Assessment. So Afshan talked a little bit about foreign USAID FSOs. So they're slightly different. They're not broken up as generalists or specialists. In fact, they're broken up by area specialties. If you want to be an environmental officer, a legal officer, a financial management officer, here's all the different ones that are listed. And your focus is often on fighting climate change, health, conflict, poverty, injustice, all of those US sustainability goals and other pressing global challenges to uplift societies. But that also means you're not going to Paris, you're not going to London, you're not being posted in developed countries, you're posted in countries that get $8 in developing countries. Payne Fellowship is set up just like the other 4 fellowships for the State Department. Similar programming and tuitions, maybe the numbers are slightly different, but you also get internships on the Hill and US made aid missions abroad. You get employment as a Foreign Service officer within USAID. Same requirements, 3.2 GPA. You must get into graduate school. You come in with a free master's that the Congress has invested in you. Now, there are foreign service programs outside of the State Department. So USAID is part of State Department because we run the development program. But there are other federal agencies such as the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce, that also have foreign service opportunities. I happened to run across this slide. Apparently, there's a diversity fellowship program for the Foreign Agricultural Service. And as you can imagine, those are foreign service officers, but that are focused on promoting US agricultural products abroad, focused on promoting US economic and agricultural services abroad. So if you are interested or have a background in exports and food security, then this is perhaps something that you might want to look into. Same deal. They'll pay for you to go to grad school. You get a 2 years master's degree. You'll do 2 internships, and then you'll join the Department of Agriculture, not the Department of State, but you'll still get a black passport because you're a foreign service officer, but you're working for your agency, the agricultural department, and you're working in a different field. There's also a foreign service through the commerce program, but I have not heard of any fellowship programs that exist on there. And I also do not know about what their application process is. I gotta imagine it's pretty similar. But again, remember, there's 2 pathways. Fellowship is different than the regular pathway. You can always apply to all of these jobs through the normal, regular pathway that exists online. That just does not require you to go back to graduate school. So with that, these are the fellowships that we covered. I'll leave this slide up for a little bit if you guys want to take a quick screenshot of it, or if you guys want to scan these QR codes to go directly to these fellowships. You can also just Google them. The goal of this presentation was to make you aware of them so that you can apply. There's different deadlines for them. Some of them are in the summer, some of them are in the fall, some of them are in early January or February. Do your research. They require a statement of interest. They require letters of recommendation. They require you to do a formal application online. So this is just like any other fellowship that you would apply to that is nationally competitive. So we already had our panelists talk a little bit about themselves, where they've served, their educational background, and what internship they did. Let's talk a little bit about this question, which is that it's a lifestyle, not a job. So I'll pass this over to maybe just Ramata and Jeremiah, because he's overseas at 3 o'clock in the morning. So can you tell us in your words, what does this mean to you that foreign service is a lifestyle, not a job? And what should aspiring applicants consider about this lifestyle when considering applying for service?
Sure. So I think you alluded to it earlier when you said that it's not a 9 to 5, um, and that you, at least in my role, like in Saudi Arabia, there was a lot of expectation to be available to do work outside of the normal hours, especially when I was running a social media account. So there's a lot that's happening outside of that normal window. So I think for one, it's just the expectation, or, have the expectation that it's not going to be 9 to 5. So that's one. Two, I think there's less of a separation between work and personal life when you're serving overseas, because you are living and working with people. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate. I guess I'm trying to say, like, there's no separation between work and personal because, like, for example, I'm going to give the example of Jeddah again. We lived on a compound. And so you're constantly seeing your coworkers. There's no separation. So in that way, that's what makes it a lifestyle as well. You're constantly going to be seeing these people, and it made me more conscious of just how I carry myself, your corridor reputation, as they say, because you're just constantly around these same people, and especially depending on the size of the mission, depending on how much mobility you have in that country, you're kind of really, there's not a lot of separation. So I think that's how I would answer it's a lifestyle, not a job. It's not a 9 to 5, and you're constantly with the people you work with. So you would need to make a conscious effort, I think, to do that separation, which I did in both of my tours, because, I don't want to be around my colleagues all the time. I like to have a separation. I made a point to cultivate relationships with local people in both South Africa and in Saudi Arabia. And I was lucky to be able to do that. I think part of it was the nature of my work as a PD officer. It's a lot of outreach. It's a lot of people to people. It's a lot of contact building. So I was able to then have that separation. But that is something to be cognizant of. And I think, and it's different when and this is a separate question, but if you're single versus with a family, that plays into it as well. When you're with a family, you can your family is I guess, your safe space, or who you can turn to outside of work. It's easier. I think when you're single, I think personally, it's more important to cultivate those relationships outside of the mission. I'll stop
Amazing.
there. Thank you.
No, that's an excellent point. So in summary, basically, what we also mean when you're on 24/7 is that they'll tell you during the security clearance and suitability process that you don't want to do anything that will ultimately embarrass the US government, right? So when you're off, right, when you go to work to the embassy and you come back home and your embassy provided housing, you're still kind of on because you don't want to go out and get drunk and then end up on the front page of a newspaper, US diplomat drunk. That damages the embassy's reputation, that damages the US ambassador's reputation, that damages the position of the US government. So in that sense, you're on 24/7. At the same time, in your personal capacity, maybe you're out at a bar, maybe you're out at a restaurant, maybe you're out shopping, someone may be following you. There might be other, agents that might be interested in your lifestyle. There may be people that are interested in what you're doing. There might be spies from other countries. So you have to maintain vigilance at all times for your safety, for the safety of your family. This is not all gloom and doom. This is, I mean, you can go to fun places and there's, I've had no issues with any of that, but you just have to be careful. You have to always be alert. You don't want to get involved in things that will embarrass you or others. But you get to live, unless you're posted to a country that lives on a compound, which can have its own limitations in terms of movement. For the most part, I served in Amman, Jordan. I served in Doha. I was able to move. I had my own car. I could go wherever. It's really fun with embassy. If you build an embassy community, we went on hiking trips together. Your embassy people become your family. They're your colleagues as well. They look out for you. My grandmother died when I was abroad. One of my cousins committed suicide when I was abroad. That was grief moments. Those are times where, and I couldn't be with my family. So I relied on my community, my neighbors to be there for me. And that's the other thing as well with the lifestyle, is that you're not going to be able to fly back for, your friends' weddings. You may not be able to fly back for birthday, but you may be able to do that abroad with other people. And a healthy advice that I always got from one of my deputy chiefs of mission was spend a third of your time with your embassy people, spend a third of the time with building local contacts outside of the embassy, and a third of the time with other diplomatic missions. So remember, in capital cities, you're also working with other elites and other diplomats that are functioning on behalf of their government to advance their country's interests. Jeremiah, I'll give you this question as well, and then we'll go on to the second question. So what is this lifestyle thing mean to you? Can you share
Yeah.
in a story, perhaps?
Yeah. So same thing. To me, it's understanding that one just cannot clock out of being a diplomat after 5 p.m., for example, and accepting that you are diplomating 24/7. I recommend folks consider how this will impact and affect your family, as this is definitely a family consideration, even though it's your decision to join. This is also touches folks who are single and not married, or who don't have kids, for instance, as we have considerations for our chosen families and extended families too, right? So glad to talk about this further. But my overall philosophy about what that is I want to work with happy folks, and happy folks are happy diplomats, and happy diplomats are happy coworkers, right? And that just makes my job easier.
Amazing. Thank you for touching on the family question. That will go to our other two panelists. So, what is your family status? Are you single, married, or with kids? And how does the department accommodate these family models for you? So, I'll start really quickly. I am single. I serve both of my overseas tours single. It is difficult to be a single person overseas, mainly because you don't have that support network of a family or a partner to rely on in times of need. I had a medical emergency for which I was medically evacuated back out to Washington, and I had to rely on my colleagues again. Um, there is a changing culture within the department about being more accommodating to single people, but at the same time, it's a pull and pull. For a really long time, the department did not accommodate to married people. It did not accommodate children. If you were a pregnant woman, you got kicked out. So the department has come a long way since the 60s and the 70s and the 40s. So it's a pull and pull. Sometimes I think the department has done a really great job of accommodating to different family models, single parents to really large families, small families to same-sex couples. And right now, some of the grumblings for single folks are that we often get voluntold for things. Oh, you don't have a family, you can take this evening event. And so you have to be your own advocate with your supervisors and kind of say, hey, even though I'm not married and I don't have kids waiting for me, I have plans too. So that's more on the the management and communications aspect of this department. But I think the department as a whole does accommodate to different family models. But I'll pass it over to Sulaiman to maybe talk about his experience of being overseas and whether he was single, dating, married, or kids. And then Afshan, who's about to join the USAID. Sulaiman, we can't hear you.
Okay, here we go. Wow. I'm glad we're talking about this because it's so important. And it's been nice for me to be stateside, to have time to spend with my family and friends, of course. As far as my situation, I'm not married, but I do have a partner who's also a foreign service officer, and she's getting ready to go to do her first diplomatic assignment. Of course, this is challenging, right? But it's a lifestyle that touches back to um, Jeremiah, Ramata, and you, Maria, you mentioned. You're signing up to do this, and it comes with its unique challenges. And um, you know, my partner and I, we try to remind each other like this is what we signed up for, and this is what it asks. Of course, it's our hope that we get a chance to serve at the same embassy, hopefully soon. But right now, we both understand that one, we're both public servants, and we chose this lifestyle. I know I wanted to do this prior, and I knew what it came with. So, in my opinion, it is one of the tough parts, being away from your loved ones. And for those who are single, it comes with its unique challenges that you kind of have to experience at firsthand. It's hard to talk about it, but when you're overseas living, it's very different than traveling to somewhere on a vacation. So yeah.
And I just want to foot stomp the note that you mentioned, Suleiman, which is that sometimes with family members, even if they're tandem, so tandem means when both couples, when both spouses are both foreign service officers or hired by the State Department. You can be a civil service and a foreign service. You can be both foreign service officers. So that's what we call a tandem couple. The department tries to accommodate you by sending you to the same assignment overseas, and you still have to compete and apply for that. However, it's not guaranteed. So sometimes couples spend time apart, married people spend time apart, and that can take a toll on its own. Sometimes, one officer is going to a conflict zone, for example, serving in Kiev or Islamabad, that are unaccompanied posts, and the other spouse has to stay behind with the kids at a different location or find an assignment somewhere else. And then let's not forget the kids. I know that none of us on this panel have kids, but the kids are uprooting themselves too. They're young diplomats. They are from every 2 to 3 years when you're being assigned to another country, they're uprooting their lifestyle, their school, their friends. So whenever you make a decision of which country you want to go to, assignments and bidding, and we can talk more about that if that's of interest. You want to make sure that it's a family decision and not just one person's decision. Afshan, I want to give you the floor as well about you. I know you're just joining and whatnot, but what are your experiences from what you've heard, and how does USAID try to accommodate different family models?
Yeah, so I'm single. I think so like in terms of the how the department accommodates these what I've noticed is it's very family centric. So it might, like what others say, it might be almost a disadvantage to be single, especially because like like because I'm going through the housing surveys and stuff like that, so you get like different housing options if you're not going with like family or anything, so that's something to keep in mind. Abroad before, so I do think that like especially if you're a woman and you're a person of color and you're single there, that might just be a little bit more challenging compared to your male counterparts. So I think those are the big things, but I think the department seems very accommodating towards like family. Like I have like friends that are moving with their spouses now, or like their children, and like their family, but they're like working with like the executive officer there and stuff like that. So yeah.
Amazing. Let's skip this question. What did you know before applying to a fellowship? Let's go to this one. So I know something that's at the top of a lot of people's mind is obviously the conflict in the Middle East, the conflicts around the world in Sudan, in Europe, in Latin America, you name it, wherever there's conflict, diplomats are there trying to help massage the situation, bring peace. Everyone's there trying to do that. But something that's at the forefront of a lot of Muslims' minds right now is that, is this the right time to join? Why should I still join? Um, how do I put my personal opinions and political views aside? And why should I still consider a career in the Foreign Service? So, who wants to take that one? Not everyone has to answer if you don't want to, but I'd like at least two participants to answer. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Jeremiah, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Oh, okay. Mine's really short. I was gonna say I like to think that visas are always going to continue being processed. We're always going to continue promoting American values and democracy and equality. We're always advocating for studying abroad and exchange, but also immigration, among other things, for other different type of folks to come and either travel and live in the United States. But on the other hand, we are also going to want to go abroad as well, right? So we also want to, as Americans, want to see the world too. So we have the diplomatic thing, and we have the work that both countries, whether it's the United States and the host country, are trying to foster a relationship so that we can have folks be mobile to and from the United States.
Thank you for that answer, Sulaiman.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Jeremiah. I mean, I think, as journalists, the unique part about this job or this lifestyle as a diplomat is, obviously, the situation in the Middle East. This is not new. It has been going on. It's a delicate topic for many Americans, not just the Muslim community. But I think you have options to select where you want, what field. I think you mentioned earlier, Mariya, we have embassies throughout the world, so it's not just the Middle East. And as you go, you can kind of make a career out of this. The regions that you're interested. And for me, that's been helpful. The places that I want to work, the regions that I'm interested in. And if it's a region where I don't come eye to eye with our policy, that's okay. But when I'm working abroad, I do have to um, follow and implement the U.S. foreign policy everywhere. But for me, I think, picking the places, the regions that I'm interested and that I see myself, I think that helps me day by day. And again, this lifestyle, you have a lot of time to reflect, and that's something that I'm grateful that I have because of my experiences as a civil servant. I can always, look back, and if it hits you, that's okay. There are other options that you can serve for your government. This is not just the only way.
I'm so glad that you said that. So, foreign service officers, as I mentioned, we are commissioned officers. So, that means we serve at the pleasure of the president. That means, regardless of the president changes, whether it's Republican Party, Democratic Party, whoever is in the president's seat, that doesn't matter. Our job is to be foreign policy implementers. We can help inform foreign policy through the work we do. We write cables, we do reporting, we do programming, we report back to Washington. We help the people in Washington, whether it's congressionals, whether it's the NSC, they make the policy, we implement. So, in terms of dissenting in the policy, there are channels where the State Department is very, very unique in being one of the only federal agencies across the federal government that allows employees, civil, foreign, contractor, fellows, to be able to express dissent. So if you genuinely disagree with a foreign policy issue, with the U.S. position on a foreign policy, with a management policy within the workings of the department, you can voice that dissent through a formal cable or report, and the secretary reads it. The secretary reads all of it, and you will get a response for that. So that's one way to be a part of the change from within. For me personally, I'm a big believer of being a change from within. I think that we need everyone to be at the table and not on the menu. The only way to bring about positive change is if we stay resilient and we continue to fight the good fight. If, however, a policy becomes too burdensome for you, it is actually really honorable to resign over a policy disagreement. You probably saw a lot of State Department people resigning over the Gaza policy currently in the Middle East. That happened also when the Iraq War happened. So there will be oftentimes in your career, you'll face challenges of what the US foreign policy is that may not align with your moral, personal, political views. And if you come to that position where you can't wake up every day to implement the policy, then it is commendable for you to find another position or to do another work or field that's more humbling and fulfilling for you. That said, um, you know, just remember that we serve at the pleasure of the president. We implement foreign policy. We help inform and shape foreign policy. We don't make the foreign policy. We will open it up for a question and answer. I did want to briefly mention that we have a lot of affinity groups at the State Department. I'll stop sharing my screen. We have affinity groups with the State Department that do a lot of really great work in advancing DEIA work, which is diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. I am one of the leaders of American Muslims and Friends at State. That's our Muslim affinity group. We have all sorts of groups from, as I mentioned, Pickering Rangel Fellowship to LGBTI to Christian Americans, Jewish Americans. We've got singles at State. We've got spouses, working spouses at State. We've got military veterans at State. We've got Peace Corps volunteers. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can find it online. But that's a really great way to be involved in an extracurricular or to have the pulse of what the department is doing and be in direct conversations with senior leadership. The work that you do in these affinity groups does make its way up to senior leadership, and you have a real opportunity to push for change. I know that just really quickly with AMFAS work, American Muslims and Friends at State, we've done a lot of really great work this year in advocating for a larger prayer space at the department. We've been advocating for, virtual community spaces, therapy spaces for people to talk and express themselves about what is happening and how they're processing some of the world events. We've advocated, we've had direct conversations with Secretary Blinken, the Deputy Secretary. We hosted an iftar meal with the Secretary to elevate our voices and show, workplace dissent and morale issues. So people are listening, leaders are there. So anyway, I'll leave it there. That was a lot of information. We will take questions now from the audience in the remaining about 20 or so minutes we have. I'll ask one of my panelists to maybe just monitor the chat and flag any questions that are maybe of interest for a lot of people. But if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you. So I see that Harris Kadir, please introduce your name and then please keep your questions brief and short so that one or two panelists can answer. Go ahead. What is your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and efforts today. I just wanted to briefly ask, for me, I'm a first generation Pakistani American. And so I did want to ask about, I know a lot of you guys come from different foreign backgrounds. I wanted to ask, how does that relate in terms of serving abroad? When you get stationed, I understand that you cannot serve within potentially your former home country, or how does that affect a first generation American?
Okay, I can take that one real quick. So essentially, that comes into play with your security clearance. So when you go through your security clearance background, if you have strong ties to your country of birth, it is possible that you may get restricted from serving there. So I am currently restricted from serving in Pakistan because the diplomatic security has determined that I have strong ties, whether it's my relatives, whether it's whatever. That doesn't mean that they're always right. In fact, one of the affinity groups that I was talking about, the Asian Americans, because they were disproportionately affected, they did a lot of great work in advocating with Congress and advocating with senior leaders. They helped uplift 700 security assignment restrictions for foreign service officers that were in place for whatever reasons, and they didn't make sense, and the diplomatic security was able to uplift them. So I don't want to say that you may not be restricted. It all depends. You have to let the process play out. But just being simply born in a foreign country or being from that country as an immigrant does not impact your ability to serve in parts of the world. If you are restricted, you will find out immediately during your security clearance process that, hey, you can serve everywhere except Pakistan, or hey, you can serve everywhere except XYZ. And that's okay. The world is still a big oyster, and you get to make amazing experiences abroad. And then you get to go back to your country in your own personal capacity, on your blue passport, not your diplomatic passport, and tell your relatives what you did in, Cameroon or something. All right. Any other question? Are there any from Jeremiah? Can I ask you to look at the chat? Let me know if they flag any questions from the chat that might be
Yeah.
well for.
So I don't see anyone, but I do see a
Okay.
previous one from SM. Can fellows take eligible dependents, spouse and children? The answer is yes, you can,
Yes.
and there are special opportunities, for example, for international schools to provide an education for your kids. And so I did want to make sure that that was answered, because you can provide options for your kids, not just at the American school, but depending on where you're posted, they might have other options as well. If you want to do, say, if you want to learn French or German or some of the other languages that have schools associated with that country or that language. I know that was the case for me in my first tour in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. They had a French school, or not a French school, they had I think it was a British school, a German school. So yeah, there are options.
Yeah. And that touches on I wrote so many perks. So children studying overseas at U.S. government funded institutions is one of the perks. Each child gets about $30,000 per year. The curriculum is often based at these overseas diplomatic military schools based off of Fairfax County School. So that just tells you how amazing our Fairfax County public school system is. And then if you have special needs children, there's often allowances for them as well to go to get the education that they need. So Hussein, you had a question? Hussein Jabal Purawala?
Sorry, I was on mute.
No worries. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. One is, Mariya, I think you had mentioned that the foreign service officers, like you had mentioned the GS scale from like 4 to 14. Was that correct? Like in the beginning of the call?
Yeah. So GS scale is for civil servants, and foreign service officers have a different scale. So when you Google the pay scale, which is the pay table is available online, you want to service foreign service pay scale. Foreign service officers, our numbers go backwards. So 6 to 4 are entry level. And then you compete for promotion for 3, you compete for promotion for 2, you compete for promotion for 1, and then after that you enter into the senior foreign service. The scale is backwards. Higher the number, higher the pay, higher the grade for GS, which is government scale, and that's what all the other federal service, federal government employees follow. FS scale is called the foreign service scale.
Okay, so for me, like I'm a GS 15. For that, if you like, would they match you to, like, whenever you get through the register, and if that happens, would they match you
So
to like
when
a
you
higher
come to
supervisory scale, or?
I can't guarantee that they'll match you, but I know of people who have successfully, when it comes to when they get the offer, which is the final step, right, and you negotiate your salary, you can argue that, hey, I was making this much, can you match it? So that's where you would have to basically advocate for yourself and the experience you have and the money that you were making. And that's a really key point, because the salary at which you come in will follow you for the rest of your career in terms of promotions.
Exactly.
So that is really key, that you get to make your salary as high as possible when you come in. You want to come in as close to 414 as possible. Grade 4, step 14. Grade 4, step 14.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Everyone has to compete for a promotion at 3. I do want to flag at this time that there's actually a new program called the LEAP program, where if you have 7 or so years of service, you can come into the foreign service at a mid-level career. position. But I don't know enough details about that, so I won't give. I don't want to pass on misinformation, but just Google that if you're
What
interested
was
in
the
that.
name of the program?
LEAP, LEEP program.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Ramiz, you had a question.
Hi. So I'm currently serving as an attorney advisor here at the SBA, and so I was looking to come in at a legal in a legal role, hopefully. But I have a question regarding, because I already have like what, 3 masters to my name. One of them, I have an LLM in international, and so I was wondering if that can transfer, whether I need to go back and get another degree.
If you
in
go
order
the
to-
fellowship route, that is, you are required to get a degree, whether it's full-time program, an evening program. Like the fellowship route is Congress paying for you to get a master's for you to join the Foreign Service, and it's possible that you already have a master's degree. Some people get their second or third or fourth because of this program. For the legal career, as I mentioned, as you saw with the generalist and the specialist, we don't have a path for, in the Foreign Service at least, for you to purely be in a legal specialty. The closest that come to that is politicals, but you'll have to do political work as well. If you want to work in the legal department, there are civil service jobs that are based in Washington primarily, and there's legal. I mean, the State Department is so big, we got to prevent ourselves from getting litigated, right? So there's legal for people that do treaties. There's legal for people that do, language abroad. There's people, but you don't serve as a Foreign Service legal advisor. You have to come in through the generalist path or the specialist path, and that's what you sign up to do. But your legal background can help you in the career field you've chosen. Maybe you want to be an economic officer and you're at the forefront of treaties, and your legal knowledge will come help you that. But if you want to do purely legal work, there's no specialty within the Foreign Service for that. But there is for the USAID USAID FSO though. So there's a legal specialty, as Afshan mentioned, for legal specialists. That's
Quick.
USAID development, not state.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Who else has a question? Come on, guys. You've got minutes left.
There's one in the chat.
Go ahead.
Let's see, from Harris. In regards to graduate program requirements or fellowships, can enrolling in graduate schools abroad count towards satisfying this requirement?
It has to be a U.S. accredited institution. So if that institution has a study abroad program or sends you abroad for a year, yes, but it can't be a foreign institution. It has to be a U.S. accredited institution, but that could be physically located in the United States or abroad. I know one of the programs does that abroad. I just forget which one, SICE maybe. Eunice, you had a question. Go ahead. Ramiz, if you still have a question, if you can raise your hand or lower it down, please. Eunice?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Just a quick question on professional development within the State Department. You mentioned that there are ample opportunities and resources. To what degree, kind of like, is there allowance for change, or like you requesting specific posts, or like you changing your mind on like which cone or like what kind of path you want to take as a Foreign Service officer?
So Sulaiman, you were talking a little bit about the assignments process. Can you very briefly tell us about the first 2 assignments being directed and then how we have a little bit more leisure afterwards?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so the first 2 assignments were entry-level officers. We don't have too much. Well, when you join, you don't have too much leeway. What that means is you'll have a career development officer where you'll work closely with, and they want to understand who you are as an individual, your family, and then they do their best to assign you um, anywhere in the world. Part of you accepting in this lifestyle is worldwide service. What that means is if the department needs you in Mauritania, then you will go to Mauritania. Obviously, if you have medical conditions, those factors come in, and that kind of helps to see a career development officer work with you. And then once you fulfill your 2 assignments, now you're in the mid-level, you have some leeway. And now, based on places you've served, you have equity. So if you've served in a tough environment on your second tour, you have a chance to go somewhere that's different. And that's usually, from my experience, the case. People want to get the tough environments earlier so that they can focus later in their career. The other places that they want to go to. But I think that's a process. You have more flexibility once you fulfill your first two assignments.
So, in summary, your first two assignments are assigned to you where big HR decides needs of the service, and you indicate your priorities. Hey, I really want to learn Arabic, but too bad, you're gonna go to Honduras. Hey, I have a child that has asthma, so please don't send me to China. Okay, fine, you'll go to Taiwan instead, right? So the department will choose for you your first two assignments, even though you can indicate a little bit your priorities, but it's not guaranteed because it teaches you to be humble. Is service needs first. After that, this is back to the lifestyle thing. Don't choose this career if you constantly hate resumes and you hate interviewing, because once you're in, you're doing that for the rest of your life. Each assignment after your first two assignment, you have to compete for. This is where your network comes into play. You have to apply for the job. You have to interview for the job. So, for example, I did an assignment in Amman, Jordan. That was directed assignment. I was then sent to Doha to do another consular assignment, directed out of my hands. Gotta, salute. Gotta go do what the service needs are. And then when I came back to Washington, I had to interview a position for the Political Military Bureau. And then to go to the UN, I had to compete with my fellow colleagues to be selected for that position. There's a job for everyone. Everyone will find a job, but it may not be your first choice or your second choice or your third choice. So every year we are updating our resume. Every year we are applying for a new job. It's not guaranteed you'll end up in Ankara. It's not guaranteed you'll end up in Geneva. You have to compete for those jobs and apply for them. So it's a continual career that you have to compete and apply for. So that's a really important note on assignments. All right, what other questions do we have? Ramzi, did you still have a question, or is that from previously?
I do. Just quick question. Like regarding once you sign up for the degree program, and I know that these stipends can be kind of competitive. So is there any way like you would know like, okay, if I do get into the degree program, I can, get this? Or is it like you're only gonna find out once you're in the program and then you've applied and then you find out?
So you have to look at the deadlines online, but essentially what happens is you apply to grad school on your own, whatever deadlines they have, and then if you find out if you're a Pickering or Rangel fellow, hopefully by springtime you know about both of them. So you can apply to grad school only and go only if you get one of these fellowships, and then you just say, hey, grad school, sorry, change my mind, not going anymore. So you just put click no on the matriculation box or whatever. But if you get the fellowship, then you want to let your grad school know, hey, I'm coming in as this fellow. But one tip on that is that let them still give you financial aid, and then let the fellowship fill in the rest. Don't just tell them you're a fellow, because then they won't give you any aid, and then you might end up spending personal extra money out of personal expenditures, which is what happened to me when I went to grad school. So don't turn down any money they give you initially, and don't tell them right off the bat that you're a fellow. Wait for all of the dust to settle, and then negotiate your financial aid package, or just your aid package in general. But yeah, that's an excellent point. They've made the deadlines on purpose in the fall such that you have enough time to get your clearance, and that you can decline a grad school program before you have to matriculate in the following year. So you have to plan ahead. You really have to plan ahead. And all of this information is online. Some of the applications are live. Some of them are due this September.
All right, thanks.
I had a colleague that was able to, because going to grad school is an opportunity cost, you're losing 2 years of work, right? So that's financial disbenefit to you. I know of a colleague or two that went to a full-time program full-time program in the evenings. So that is one option after you get the fellowship, that you can speak to the fellowship's office and say, hey, I have financial needs, I support my family, whatever your situation is, that I need to maintain my current 9-to-5 job, and then I will do this grad school program at Georgetown or George Washington or wherever you go to grad school in the evenings. I will attend my classes, and I'll still graduate, and I'll get the degree. I'll put in the work, but then you're on double duty. You're doing your daytime job and you're doing your evening time job, and hopefully your boss can allow that too.
Enough. Thanks.
Thanks, Ramata, for answering some of the questions in the chat box for our people. Yep, it is a 5-year commitment. So if you come through the fellowship, because the federal government is making an investment in you by funding you, your education and your clearance, you have to owe them back 5 years minimum. Otherwise, you have to pay them back the money that they invested in you. So you must work at least a minimum 5 years as a foreign service officer. Habiba, you had a question. Go ahead. You're on mute, dear. We can't hear you. Ramiz, your hand is still up.
I joined lately because I have some internet problem and I'm fixing, and thank God I catch up in few minutes. I have a one more question. I just graduated from my international studies degree, and another degree I'm going to graduate in August, which is law in society, and I'm going to take LSAT exam. And I am working with as an independent contractor with the immigration, I help the people and I am a self independent contractor. So what is the best career I can start from the foreign service? As right now I have an international studies degree, I'm bachelor, and then I have another degree, law in society, and then I have a 27 years of experience with the immigration services.
Yeah, so let me share my screen again. As I mentioned with the Foreign Service, it's not what background you come in with. Your background helps enable and make you a better a better performer in your job. But what you can only join the Foreign Service in the following capacities. So let me know if you can see my screen. At the State Department, you can only come in as a generalist and you select a political cone, an economic cone, public diplomacy cone, management, or counselor. And if you want to be a specialist foreign service officer, you choose from one of these key areas. Within the USAID Foreign Service, there's more flavor and more opportunities to be specialized in crisis stabilization, program manager, financial, environmental, education, agriculture, population health, nutrition, private enterprise. So it's not that like what you studied is how it's going to translate. It's what you studied is going to just enable you to be a better officer in these categories. So maybe you select one of these that you gravitate towards. I hope that's helpful. Anyone else want to add to that if I didn't do a good job of answering that? Shahid, you had a question. Go ahead. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so when you go through your medical clearance, that information is private between you and the medical provider. In fact, even the career development officers don't see or know about any of your medical conditions, and they should never even ask for the HIPAA requirements. So what happens is when you go through your medical clearance, there's 3 different levels of medical clearances or several levels of it. The class 1 clearance is your worldwide available, meaning you're a healthy person, you can walk and talk. Well, you don't have to walk if you have a disability, but you are a healthy person being able to serve in a certain place, but whatever their classification of it is, that you can serve worldwide available. Now, when you serve worldwide available, if you're going to countries that have high smog, like Russia does, or high malaria rates, or whatever have you, they pay you an extra differential. We didn't get to talk about allowances, but maybe that's what we can do next year, Maya. Talk a little bit about the different allowances for different danger pays. So the department will pay for you to risk your health a little bit more for going to some of these countries. But class 1 is worldwide available. Class 2 is maybe you have some sort of condition. Again, we don't know what the condition is. Your HR person who's assigning you assignments will just say, okay, Shahid is a class 2, and the world is divided up into class 1, class 2, and class 7 class medical countries. So that means you are then limited to only class 2 countries. And if you're a class 7, meaning you have a severe condition or you're unable to serve until you get better, then you're only assigned to very specific countries. What that means is they're looking out for your best interest. They want to assign you to countries where you have ample care and ample facilities to be able to get the medical care that you need. So if you have diabetes or if you have other things, maybe you bring some of your medications with you. That's no problem. Maybe it's just something you have to self-care for yourself, but they want to make sure you have the medical facilities available. So yes, your medical clearance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, will impact where you get assigned. And that is a conversation you will have with your assignments officer when you join. But that could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Some people, use that as an opportunity to, prioritize their health, which is important. Like your health is your wealth. You don't want to go to countries that can jeopardize your health. And that's another way the department's very accommodating. I know we're past 7:30, so if people have to hop off, please hop off. We will stick around for another 5 to 10 minutes if the panelists are available too, to answer any more questions. I mentioned allowances, so maybe Jeremiah, do you want to talk a little bit about the different allowances of when we go for a different country, how our pay changes?
Yeah, so I'll keep this brief since I don't have exact numbers, but there's differential pay, there's danger pay. So that means depending on the country, there are certain requirements based off security that are also taken into consideration when you're bidding these posts. So keep in mind that if money is a consideration for you and your family, these posts with higher differential or higher danger might be for you. There are also allowances for pets. Say you have a pet and you want to bring your dog with you, a dog among other kinds of pets. Then that there is an allowance option for that. There's allowances for your
Cost
kids.
of living.
So cost of living, yeah, all of these different options are available, and you'll have more information once you join. But when it comes to bidding, each post is different in terms of danger, in terms of differential, and all those will be available once you join. But the general rule is the less garden post it is, the lower the pay. The more danger or the more the more garden post it is, the less differential and less danger, and the more non-garden, then yeah, that's when you have more money.
Awesome. Thank you, Ramata, for your time and serving as a panelist. And thank you, Jeremiah, for your time, and Sulaiman and Afshan. Everyone, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We hope that this session was useful for you. Please check out the resources online. Look at the Foreign Service selection process. Fellowships are not the only way to come through, but if you are at a stage in your life where you want to get a master's, maybe look at one of those fellowship programs and see if it's the right path for you. Come join us in the Foreign Service. It's a humbling career. It takes you around the world to places you've never been, and it's stories of a lifetime. So we're all here as a resource for you, and we hope to see you in the halls of the State Department someday. All right. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.